Hey everyone, and welcome to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, that is Tim, and we talk about horror movies on this show. This episode is actually one of our monthly special episodes because the movie was voted for by our patrons over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, just to plug it. But they get a vote once a month, and the vote for this month got into it because, of course, there's a new Stephen King related film coming out next week in the guise of It. So we had Stephen King vote, we had Stephen King movies, and the winner of that vote was Silver Bullet. Normally I'll announce the movie in advance of the episode, but this is literally the first episode of the month because this is where we're squeezing it in. So, yeah, Silver Bullet, werewolf movie, Stephen King.
Ooh.
We shall start spoiler free. I will give you warning before we go into spoilers, and that's how we will proceed. So, I had never seen this before. You had. This was an old favourite of yours. Was it a favourite? Am I describing that correctly?
I mean, favorite in terms of, like, not all-time favorite horror movies, but this was one that I liked quite a bit as a kid. I actually have read the story it's based on. I don't think it was a full book.
No, I think I noticed in the credits at the start, it was like based on the... I can't even remember what it said. It wasn't short story, but it wasn't like book or
novella,
novel.
Maybe.
It wasn't even novella because it was like a phrase I wasn't as used to seeing.
And see, the reason why I'm a little confused is because of the version I have. It's called Cycle of the Werewolf, and the one I had was like a tiny. It was a small book that was it was like illustrated, not like a comic book, but it would have, like one page would be a picture, and then the next page would be the story. So I'm not sure if originally maybe it was part of a short story collection or something, and then they did this special illustrated version. But actually, I'm not sure if I still have that copy around. I'd like to dig it out somewhere. But I read the original story and liked that quite a bit, and I had a lot of fondness for this as a kid.
Cool.
And
I had never seen it. I didn't really know anything about it. I knew it was a werewolf movie, but like beyond that, I didn't know anything. I didn't even know who the casting was, and I feel like people did me a disservice by not telling me that Gary Busey was in a werewolf movie, and somehow he's not the werewolf. I don't know how that happened, but he's not. And he's not the only notable cast member. We got Everett McGill, who, I mean, obviously, just last night the Twin Peaks finale was on. Everett McGill's mostly known for his role in Twin Peaks. I also know him from the as the villain from Under Siege 2, which weird clip of fame, but hey, so he's another friendly face. And then you've got Terry O'Quinn as the town sheriff, from Lost, old John Locke. So nice seeing him. So a whole bunch of faces, and of course Corey Haim plays the sort of the main character who's a kid, who's in
another 80s mainstay.
Yeah, an 80s mainstay. Yeah. One of the Coreys. This is probably the youngest I've seen him. I don't recall seeing him this young. I always think of him as a teenager.
What? I mean, must have been before Lost Boys.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. This is probably the youngest I've seen him too. Then.
I think so. I mean, maybe I'll look at his cast. His IMDb, and I'll be like, oh yeah, no, I have seen that from like 1982 when he was like 8. But here we go. So, werewolf movie, and. It's a weird werewolf movie, I'll say that. But my first thoughts is that the majority of this movie, it's a werewolf movie that's not really a werewolf movie. It's actually just a serial killer movie. The killer just happens to be a werewolf.
Right.
That's how it feels. Like, the actual werewolf kills, they feel like almost POV shots of a serial killer. And like they're kind of like these weird, like, he'll break into a house and kill someone and then just leave. And no one will see him. And it's like, this doesn't feel like a werewolf, even though it is a werewolf, and I'm seeing like quick shots of werewolf-looking hands and paws and obviously the mask eventually. But so that's my first thought. I had no idea the main character, which is Marty, played by Corey Haim, that he is in a wheelchair. The wheelchair was motorized, and it's called the Silver Bullet.
Yeah,
I was not prepared for that because I thought, wait a minute, I thought it was called Silver Bullet because ultimately the werewolf will need to be taken down with the silver bullet. And while that does come into the story, I thought, That's a bit weird that he's like, no one even acknowledges it when they actually have to start talking about an actual silver bullet. No one acknowledges that his wheelchair is also called a silver bullet. No one brings it up. In two versions of it as well. He gets like a new souped up version that's like basically a motorbike with a wheelchair attached to it later on.
I kind of love that. Like, it's not because there are like automatic like wheelchairs that have, I guess, a motor or something, but they still go like like decently slow. I like that he has like this crazy souped up, like almost like a mini like car or something that he's like driving around in. There's actually like a car chase.
There is a car chase with this souped up wheelchair, which I was not prepared for. And obviously this souped up wheelchair comes from Gary Busey's character, who's Uncle Red, who is the sort of the uncle that his parents aren't really happy that he's been an influence on him. Like, he's drinking around him, he's he's playing cards, he's telling kind of rude jokes and all these other things. And honestly, it cut to like him hanging out with young Marty, and he's doing all his stuff, and all I could think was, yep, that's what it would be like to have Gary Busey as your uncle.
Oh yeah.
He just feels like he's been Gary Busey, and I loved it. Oh no, Gary Busey is corrupting my child. No, I have to intervene.
If anything, it's kind of weird, like knowing, Gary Busey now. I feel like it's almost seems like a little subdued. Like, I was surprised that he didn't go crazier with some of this stuff in here. I think like there are like little like maybe like glimpses of like the full Gary Busey craziness, but I think for the most part,
this was not his final form, Tim. He's still evolving. No. Still evolving. So you've got all this going on, and you've got Everett McGill plays the town reverend, who's a character in the story. Another main character, of course, is Marty's sister Jane, who actually narrates the story at the start and the end. I do think that the narration was a bit weird and out of place. Not at first. Like, when it started that way, I thought, okay, this is going to be a thing. But then it stops happening, and it stays away for like the majority of the movie, and then comes back in towards the end. In fact, after the opening, right, when it's like, okay, my name's Jane, and this was my brother Marty, and then she actually kind of leaves the movie for a long time. There's like a long stretch of time where she doesn't feel that important, and she does eventually come back into it. But I was glad she did, because I felt like, why is she narrating there? Like, she's barely involved in any of this, but she does eventually become involved. So,
and I also felt like her. I'm trying to think of how to put this. Like, her character, I thought was pretty annoying, but almost like in an unfair kind of way. Like, I feel like they paint her as this really put upon, person, trying to deal with, having a brother who's in a wheelchair, and then there's a lot of, stuff on her of having to kind of like step up and take a lot of responsibility, and dealing with like unfair treatment and attention giving to her. But I feel like we only ever see we don't really see that stuff actually happening. We just kind of see like her effects of being mad about it. Like, there's a lot of times that she kind of goes off on stuff like, oh, like, why is all this put on me and blah blah blah. But like the Corey Haim's character, it's like, well, he seems like being perfectly pleasant. Like, it doesn't seem like he's forcing you to do stuff.
I think the relationship actually benefits once like he comes in to apologize and he tries to give her money, because he ruins her was it pantyhose? He ruins her pantyhose, and he gives her some money to buy some new ones, and it's like their relationship from then on is kind of sweet. So it does kind of work to a point. But it's funny because I actually have some context for this, because my father, before he passed away, had MS, so he was in a wheelchair pretty much the majority of my life. So being in the house with someone in a wheelchair is actually something I'm used to, and I understand all the little quirks that come along with that. And what I was not prepared for though is, so at one point he's got like this girl that he's friendly with, and might be a love interest for him, and he takes her home because someone's already died at the start of the movie. And so the town's on edge, and it really paints this idea of the town's like this small community that everyone knows each other, and it's going for that kind of vibe, and very Stephen King actually when you say it like that.
Oh, yeah.
He actually quote unquote walks her home, right? And he drops her off at her house, and he's going to go away, and he's got his. And by the way, I love that he goes to fill up at the gas station. Like he actually goes in and he's like, "Oh, fill her up, she's empty." And he's like, "Oh, do you want me to give her a full look over?" But he drops her off, and her dad is really dumb cripples. They're just on welfare. Oh, we should just get rid of them all. And I'm like, well, that came out of nowhere. Like, what? Is this a theme of the movie that he's a burden on everyone? And I don't know, because it felt like it was maybe going to go down that path between the sister talking about she feels that she has all this extra pressure and she has to live up to higher standards because he has to be given leeway with more things, and then you've got this asshole dad making these just random extreme comments. I'm like, right, are we going down this path? Well, this is what the movie's kind of about. But honestly, after this point, I never really felt like it did anything with it. It just kind of from that point on, it was just because, I mean, obviously being in a wheelchair made him more vulnerable, and that became a thing, when he was in danger with either the werewolf or, with car chases. We'll get to that.
Yeah, I think there's a really good, tense scene that comes into play probably towards about halfway through or so into the movie.
Yeah, we'll save some spoilers stuff for spoilers, but so I guess I've been dancing around like if I did I like it or not, and yeah, I mean I had fun. I enjoyed myself. I do think it's very flawed though. Like, there's a lot of things I can point at and go, oh, that character doesn't quite add up, or I don't quite get why this is happening, or motivations don't make sense. And maybe this is a cruel thing to pick on, but I do actually think the werewolf itself looks kind of shitty.
Yeah, I think that and going back and watching it, I think they did a lot of kind of quick shots. Like you don't see it moving very often. Like you'll see an arm swiping across someone or kind of poking out somewhere. Or
that was kind of my biggest problem though. It was the arms swiping. Like it always felt really stiff. It felt like someone just had a rod up a puppet thing and was just sort of swinging it. There was no feeling of movement in it. It was just kind of like this big stick that was being swung, but it just happened to be furry and had like a claw at the end.
Yeah, and I feel like it's pretty hard. Like any werewolf, maybe it's not really fair, but I just can't help but judge it to American Werewolf in London, which just has some of the best special effects and transformation.
I don't think that's unfair though, because that came before this. That was like 4 years before this. I think it would be unfair to look at, and I don't think there is really like a crown jewel of like modern werewolf movies where we're like, oh, that's the best werewolf CG we've ever seen, right? I can't really think of one where I'm like, because I mean I love Ginger Snaps, but even that's mostly practical and it's very different, and there's no like big moment of werewolf cinema the recent years where we go, but if there was and you compared it to that and said, oh, it's not as good as what we just had, I was like, oh yeah, because we've got more technology, we've got a lot more things, but no, we're comparing it to its contemporary, we're comparing it to a movie that came first and did much better. And while they can't always be equal to each other, of course, and you don't want it to look the exact same, you want them to do their own thing, but I did think the werewolf felt very stiff. So,
yeah, I think I was a little worried going back because it's been a while since I watched it, so I wasn't sure if it was gonna hold up for me. I thought maybe I'll still like it from a nostalgia point of view, but I might also be like, ugh, doesn't hold up well. But I'd say I still enjoyed it, but yeah, I think there were a couple of flaws. Like there was some like a little bit of maybe cheesiness and the stuff here and there that's like, that dialogue's not the best or whatever. I do like that it's from a kid's point of view though. Like the idea, and I also like that no one ever, like outside of like how many sisters sort of come to believe what's going on, and then eventually Uncle Red kind of gets brought. He never really believes, but like no, the town never actually really find out, which actually leads to one of my biggest problems of the movie. Is there's a whole thing where after like 2 or 3 people have died, right, and they're like, oh, there's someone out there killing people. This basically lynch mob kind of forms. Like this guy leads them out the bar and they go hunting, and I was never really sure, like, why did they have a direction to go in? Like, where were they going that made sense to them? Like, because at times it really felt like they were hunting an animal, but they didn't really know it was an animal. Yeah.
Like there was just a lot of things like, whoa, I don't understand their thought process and their decision making here. They've basically just been out into the woods with guns. It's like, well, why do you, if it is a guy, if it's a man, if it's a serial killer out in the woods, why do you think he's just going to be in the woods, like hanging out? It just, there was just parts of it that didn't quite add up in terms of their thought process.
So I liked that it's kind of a look at a small town dealing with this killer, and but I think the problem was that is mostly focused on the kid, this main character, so that when you do have the scenes about this town wanting justice, which I thought was like really interesting, it would have been cool, but it does feel out of place because it's like, why are we following these characters? So maybe it would have been better if it kind of had more of a focus on the town as a whole, so that you could get these little side stories or whatever. And
especially since once they do go looking for whatever they're looking for, and like several of them get killed, right?
Yeah.
Several of them die in this hunt, and it doesn't really feel like anyone ever brings this up later. It's just kind of the end of the plot of these characters. No one ever talks. There was a whole pack of them, and some of them witness what goes on and they run away, and no one ever seems to really bring it up after that.
Yeah, we don't really see the effects, like something like a movie like Scream, where they have, talking about, people inputting curfews and, closing down school and stuff because of what's going on. Like, especially, with a really small town, you would think that there would be more of a, an emphasis on stuff and more people being scared. And you don't really see any kind of the effects of what's going on, especially since it is quite a bit of people that are dying.
So some of that stuff didn't add up for me, but I did have fun though. Like I think there's some good sequences in here. I do like that it comes from this kid's point of view, and the idea that he was rebellious uncle who's like helping them out and stuff. Like there's a lot of the movie I like. There's enough of it I like that I actually did have a good bit of fun with it, even if there's a lot of problems along the way with stuff like the werewolf effects, like some character motivations, some of the weirder focus elements of the movie. But I think because you do have like a rocket-powered wheelchair, you have to go in with a various degree of like, okay, this isn't going to be a grounded, serious movie in the strictest sense.
And I think that's the big takeaway, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. Because it's I think at the end of the day, not a great movie, not super well made, but at the same time, I think it still holds up as being a good bit of fun. And like stuff like the rocket powered wheelchair and stuff is just like something that I don't know, I feel like you couldn't really get away with nowadays, but just as such a fun like 80s thing.
And keep in mind, this is detailed. There's flames on this thing and everything. Like he's put a lot of work into this. It's the Silver Bullet Mark II. So I think we'll go to spoilers. I think we've done what we can and spoiler free, and even then we might have tiptoed over a couple of lines there, to be honest. But full spoilers from this point on. So let's talk about who the werewolf is, because that kind of becomes a big thing. So basically, people are being murdered, right? And young Marty's disappointed because everyone's been murdered. The town fair's been cancelled, so there's no fireworks show. So it's the same night that he's got his new bike, his new wheelchair bike combo thingamajig, that Uncle Red, Gary Busey, gives him a bag of fireworks to a kid in a wheelchair and says, "Don't go too far from home. There's people getting murdered, and you're actually like, yeah, just go outside and sneak out and let off some fireworks." So he goes out to a bridge and he starts setting off some fireworks, and he's not really, I mean, you may have a safe distance when you set off a firework, and he's just letting them off right in front of him. But again, his health and safety wasn't what it was, I suppose, or what it would become, I should say. But he's out, and of course this is basically like a flare gun. Like it's almost like he signals a flare for the werewolf, because he sets off a firework and then it cuts to this close up of the werewolf, and he's like, "Oh, light, things happening," and the werewolf shows up, and there's basically a standoff, and young Marty basically grabs his rocket, his rocket firework, and he sets it off, and it fires straight into the werewolf's eye, and he gets away, and he rides back home. By the way, I will say this: I was really impressed with him climbing out of his window, without the use of his legs. Like he sort of dangles himself down and like gets into his chair. I'm like, man, like when I see regular people like sneak out of the windows in movies, I was like, oh, it's fine, whatever. Like, But like to see a kid who, I mean, obviously he does have these legs, the actor, but like just to see him pretend to not be able to use them and just let them dangle is actually kind of impressive. I bet he worked out his arms quite a bit doing all this.
Oh, sure.
I don't know how many takes that took, but so he gets home. I did like that when he gets home, he sort of snuggles up in the corner of his bed and he's just like terrified, you know.
Yeah.
But he explains to his sister and he explains what happened and he tries to convince her, and this is where she comes back into the movie because she's been kind of out of it, she's been kind of absent doing her own thing, and she's like, she basically comes up with this thing where she goes around, and this is when the narration comes back in as well, and she goes around town under the guise that she's collecting like recyclables for the church for whatever, for their fundraising, and she's going around, and the whole idea is that okay, because he stabbed out an eye, someone will be wearing an eye patch or whatever, and she's going around and she's like looking closely, and I like this scene. I like this looking for the one who's missing an eye, even though it became very obvious who it was going to be, like, you know, soon before it happened.
Yeah, and I do think it is strange, like when she's at the barber shop, like no one calls her out for just being like a weird girl just staring at people. Like to the point where she's like, you know, people are laying down with like washcloths on their faces, and she just like takes them off, and I don't know, it's kind of funny, but I do think it's like a weird scene.
So she eventually takes all the stuff to the church, and of course she's like, okay, I bet it's the Reverend, because he's been a character. We've seen him a few times, and they've made a point. And even he has this weird dream at one point where he dreams he's in church giving a sermon, and like everyone turns into a werewolf in front of him. And he wakes up in a cold sweat. It's actually really obvious at that point, kind of, that he's going to be the werewolf.
Yeah, I feel like maybe if they would have taken that scene out, there would have been probably a lot less, guessing that it was going to be him.
Because you could put that after this scene and still have the moment if you want it, to show that he's like sort of thinking about this stuff and it's in his head. But of course, he's the one with the eye patch. He's got like a bandage over his eye, and he has this.
I do like.
Oh, go on.
Oh, sorry. Oh no, I do like the way that they reveal it, like, you know, because you kind of see her finally like give up and be like, all right, that's, you know, I checked everyone, you know, it's not gonna happen, and then she's bringing the cans to him, and she's not even looking at him at that point. She's walking right behind him, and he's like gardening and lifts his head up. Because
even we don't see him at first, we see him from afar and from behind, because he's down in the dark, he's like trilling he's taking out weeds or something. He's doing some gardening, and. We don't see him at first, which is why I'm like, okay, it's definitely him, because they're hiding his face, and sure enough, we get she doesn't see it, but we do. We see the eye, and we have this really creepy moment afterwards where she's in like the hut in the back, and she finds like one of the baseball bats that's the other thing is Marty's best friend, who's a bit of a douchebag, but he gets killed by the werewolf. They just find his bloody kite like just left. So she goes back and she tells Marty the whole thing, and he seems to know, and this is where it starts to play a little bit with what I expect from werewolf stories, because he knows, like he seems to remember that what happened with Marty, and he's suspicious of her. And when this is another weird thing, Marty and Jane then start sending him like letters made up of newspaper clippings. It's like the ransom letter that the kidnappers send, telling him to kill himself. Now, I get the logic, don't get me wrong. I don't think I was prepared for this kid sending a letter to a priest saying, hey, kill yourself. It's pretty dark.
Oh, yeah. I guess, like, it's an interesting way to take it. I guess maybe because they're kids, it's like, well, I mean, we can't, kill this grown man who's also a monster, but maybe we can try to appeal to his, supposedly he is a man of God, that maybe if we can appeal to, like, hey, you're killing people and hurting people, maybe kill yourself, get rid of them.
Yeah, but that's the problem to a fault, because he's like, no, killing yourself's a sin. I can't kill myself, so I'll keep killing people. It's fine. Dear.
It seems like probably the easiest thing to do would be the Buffy method, where you just chain yourself whenever there's a full moon.
Sure. Although they establish in this that it doesn't take a full moon. Like he's a wolf like constantly. Because they bring that up, because that's actually one of Uncle Red, when he's trying to talk them out of this nonsense. He's like, yeah, but it wasn't even a full moon last night, as if it's a fact, and they're like, nah, but maybe he just gets stronger at a full moon, or maybe he's just more vicious at a full moon, but he seems to be wolfing all the time. So they send these letters for a bit, like some time passes and they've been sending these letters, and it's kind of funny when like Gary Busey like finds out and he's like, you've been sending these letters to this patient, you've been like harassing him and telling him to kill himself. Yeah, that's not creepy. But the Reverend, shows up at Marty's school like after after school one day, and he follows him, and of course he's in his Silver Bullet Mark II, and he notices he's been followed, and we get a car chase. He chases him in a car, and it is ridiculous. And it's funny because someone, like, there's a joke when he first gives him this new souped up version of his wheelchair. He's like, "Oh, have you got a pilot's license?" And I actually thought, at what point does this require a driver's license or a motorcyclist license to drive this thing? Because it's going fast as I mean, maybe not a full speed of a motorbike, but it's going pretty damn fast. It's like beyond golf cart levels. It's going fast. That he's got an exhaust fume that's like actually pumping stuff out. Like, stuff's happening. But they have this chase, and he ends up getting into this barn at the end, and the Reverend like comes out, and there's like this long, slow, sort of suspenseful scene as he's walking towards them, basically saying, "Look, you should have just left me alone, but now I need to do something." Luckily, someone's outside and hears him, and that's how he sort of screams and ends the scene.
And I like this because the chair runs out of gas, so that's why he's like stuck. But it's such a good, like, again, to this point the Silver Bullet has seemed like pretty powerful and a good means of escape. But then once it's out of gas, it's not even like a conventional wheelchair that you could try to kind of roll it or something. It's like he's really stuck and vulnerable.
Yeah,
and then
you can't switch to just manual controls in this thing because the wheels are all like hidden behind various, the sort of shielding and all that.
Yeah, and I think I wasn't really that familiar with him, but the actor who played the Reverend, I just thought did a really good job of being menacing, and especially in this scene where he's kind of like coming in and lurking in the darkness.
Yeah, no, I think it does a really good job. And of course, it's this. Basically, there's a dent on the wheelchair / bike, on the Silver Bullet, and this is kind of what finally makes Gary Busey kind of not maybe believe the werewolf part, but believe that this Reverend is dangerous and that he's coming after him. So he sees that, he goes to the sheriff and he's like, "Yeah, I don't really believe all the werewolf stuff, but I believe there's something up with him. Like, the Reverend's." Maybe the killer at the very least. And then obviously Terry O'Quinn, the sheriff, goes to the Reverend, and unfortunately, this is where we finally see like the werewolf transformation. I combined my words there, and the werewolf actually kills him by beating him over the head with a bat, which I thought was a bit of a weird way for a werewolf, because that's actually maybe one of my other complaints about the end of the movie. So Uncle Red sends the parents away on a trip. He claims to have won a trip, but the whole idea is that he's there with the kids, and the kids have given them their necklaces and lockets that are made of silver to melt it down and make a bullet. Which, by the way, really weird scene where he goes to the gunsmith and he's like, silver bullet, here you go. It's like, it doesn't actually have to fire. It's just like a trinket. He's what was it? He's a fan of the Lone Ranger. He wants it's like a souvenir kind of thing, and he's like, or to kill werewolves. And the guy just seemingly like is aware of werewolves, but it's fine. So he ends up waiting back with the kids, and that's kind of the final like 5-10 minutes of the movie is they're waiting for the werewolf to show up because it's the full moon. Like, they think they've been waiting for the full moon because he's wanting to be the most vicious when he comes after them, and they're waiting up all night. He's got the gun, he's almost fallen asleep and all the rest of it. The werewolf shows up and they have a fight, and Gary Busey gets thrown around the room. And this is where the complaint I was getting to is that in the first half of the movie, whenever the werewolf comes into contact with someone, they're just immediately ripped to shreds. There's no chance of them surviving longer than a second. Yet for some reason in this final fight, he's thrown around Gary Busey into the walls and not killing him. It's just, it's just kind of the plot, armor, just to make it work. It feels like, in the opening scene, he beheads this random drunk guy. In an instant, the kid's mauled. The asshole father who was, making all the cripple comments, he has this weird thing where the werewolf's hiding under the floor outside the barn, and he ends up going like a pipe goes through his chest, and it's very quick deaths. Whereas here, for some reason, this kid who can't walk, his teenage sister, and the uncle who's been thrown around the room are all surviving for a good couple of minutes. You know, because all the drama of like trying to reach the bullet because the bullet falls out the gun, and they're trying to like get it through the grate, and all these other little bits of things going on. And then eventually Marty gets the gun loaded and fires it and kills them, and he sort of transforms back. How they're going to explain this dead reverend in their house was a question I am curious about. But
that was one thing I was actually pretty I don't know if I'd really thought about it before, but I was like, yeah, how the hell are they going to explain this to whoever? But I think you're making a lot of very fair points. I don't think there's really any good answers other than like, well, they're gonna survive longer because they're the main characters. And
I think that's maybe the problem of showing your killer to be so effective and then having to neuter them for the final sort of act so the main character can survive longer. It's like either you write it in such a way that the main character, it feels purely circumstantial, that they're just lucky enough that other things are going on that stop them from being as vicious, or you don't rate them as vicious in the first place so that you can buy later on that they had a chance. So I think maybe like my final criticism here of the ending would be that, so the movie makes this big fuss about it's a small town community. This thing's affecting everyone. Like everyone's scared to go outside because there's a killer on the loose. And then we never really see the town know that it's over. Like it just like you know, the werewolf gets killed in the house, but the rest as far as the rest of the town's concerned, the killer's still out there, and they would like still think it's dangerous for a long time before maybe enough time has passed without incident that they think, okay, maybe the killer's not around anymore. But like you never actually see this the resolution where the town knows it's okay or knows that the danger's over. And I thought that was a little bit weird, because the movie makes such a big thing of it being the whole town and it affects everyone. But again, after that scene where they go out into the woods and like some of them die like really quickly, and it's very almost the velociraptors in the grass in the second Jurassic Park, where the wolf hand just comes out the mist and like pulls them down.
If I it's been so long since I read the book, but if I remember correctly, I do think it was more town focused as opposed to this one particular kid. I could be wrong though. It's been a long time since I read it, but I would have liked to have seen more of that kind of stuff, more of the other town characters, more of the effects of what is going on with this community. I mean that's why I kind of liked the scene where they're all kind of getting together like this mob justice, and the one guy's talking about like, oh, like they took my boy, we got to do something, and standing up to the cops like, oh, you're not doing anything, we get like. So I thought that stuff was interesting, but it is weird to it just kind of comes out of nowhere when the rest of the movie hasn't been focusing on those people.
They took my boy. I just laughed at that line because that's a line from Lost. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I when I hear that phrase, I think I Lost anyway. But I thought of that, and then I was like, oh yeah, Terry Quinn's in that scene.
She's right there.
Yeah. So no. So I think you're right, because it ends on like this freeze frame of the final moment of like them holding each other, brother and sister, and she's like, I don't always get to say it, or I can't always say it, but I love you, Marty. And it's like the whole thing's been like them bonding, and I think that's fine to have that as the heart of the movie. Like I think it's a fine thing, like the idea of this brother and sister like looking out for each other. Like I think that's actually a really cool idea. But it's only 90 odd minutes long. Like add another 5 minutes, have a little bit more of the town. Have a scene at the end where the town knows the danger's over. Maybe the town finds out about what's actually going on as well. Before the final conflict. So that they can then believe that it's so, because I mean the sheriff's dead as well. It's not even like the sheriff knows the werewolf's been dealt with and can tell the town, look, we've caught the killer, you don't have to worry, it was the Reverend.
Yeah.
Like no one's going to find out, so it's kind of weird.
And they actually, it could have been really easy because they set up a whole narration thing. Like you could have easily had, it would have been a little cheap, but you could have had some ending narration just talking real quick, like, nobody believed us, but like no one really ever found out truly what happened, but people chalked it up to this or that or whatever, something.
But that's kind of where I fall. I think it's a fun movie. I think it's definitely a product of its time, and it feels kind of dated. But if you like movies of the 80s, you like the idea of the 80s kids kind of working together to try and take down the bad guy. I think there's fun to be had. It's just I think there's enough problems that it stops it from being like a genuinely really good movie.
Yeah, I think like the town stuff I feel like is a big issue. I feel like I could have maybe let it go though if the werewolf stuff looked a little better. To me, that's probably the biggest thing. Like I still liked looking at it when it was on screen, but again, it was more just a like very kind of stiff wooden like thing. Like there wasn't a lot of movement, didn't feel very realistic or fluid.
I think it's interesting that you said you like this as a kid, because I do actually watching it. I feel like it is very, very kid. I mean, there's a little bit of blood, but it feels very like, I think you could show a 10-year-old this and they could get into it and it wouldn't feel like it's too extreme for them.
Yeah, there's no nudity. I don't think there's really that much swearing. So I mean, yeah, just other than like a little bit of gore.
I'm just thinking in terms of how intense it is, because there's some tension, but it's not like this extreme amount where it's like super visceral. It feels like a very kind of not heartwarming, but like it feels like a comfortable amount of scary, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah.
And yeah, I always feel like I like the idea of werewolves, but it's one of those ones where when I try to think about it, I can't really think of like a bunch of amazing werewolf movies. So I'm always happy when there are ones that I like.
Yeah, there's a few that I really like. It's interesting though. This is only I think the third werewolf movie we've done on the show.
Oh wow! Yeah, I feel like we didn't do that many, but
yeah, we did Ginger Snaps, which is one of the ones that I really like. Maybe
Ginger Snaps is great.
Yeah. We also did Bad Moon, which if you don't remember that's a movie where the main character is a dog named Thor, and it's not a great movie, but it's worth watching just for the fact that the main character is a dog named Thor. And it may not seem like he's the main character at first, but trust me, once you watch the whole movie, you'll see that he is the true hero of that movie. We did that. I'll make sure there's a link to these movies in the corner at some point.
But yeah, I'm always excited to see a good werewolf movie.
Yeah. So there you go. That is Silver Bullet. But I want to reiterate, I did have fun. Like I had some fun with it. So as we get into the ratings here, I think I want to get across that it's not a great movie. There's a lot of flaws, but I did enjoy my time with it, and I think it is worth a watch. If it sounded appealing, if what we said sounded like something you'd get a kick out of, I think you would probably enjoy it. It would a nice afternoon Sunday viewing, I guess. Is my final words on it. So Tim, what would you rate Silver Bullet out of 10?
So yeah, some definite flaws. But yeah, still a lot of fun, and for me, the nostalgia factor is definitely gonna play into it too. I'm gonna give it a nice solid 7. Maybe might be a tad high, but I don't know. Again, something I really liked as a kid, and still had a lot of fun rewatching now.
Yeah, I am going to go a bit lower. I think it's more of a solid 6 for me, where like I enjoyed it. It's good fun, but it's not anything special in a lot of other ways, and there's definitely faults to look at. So for me, it's a solid 6, which is to say, it's just good. I liked it. 6 is often a number I'll whip out when it's like it's not that great a movie, but I had fun anyway. 6 gets whipped out a lot for those types of movies, and that's kind of where I'm landing on this.
And I usually don't think this about a lot of movies I enjoy, because for the most part, I usually, if I like it, I kind of just want it to be left alone. But I think this one actually could like be a decent remake.
Oh if God, someone, the dreaded R word. Tim, what are you doing?
But I mean, I think if someone maybe went back, maybe did a little closer to the source material or something.
Honestly, Tim, I think
better effects.
I think it's a matter of time, especially see if it does well, and I feel like it might. If it does well, I feel like we're going to see a lot of Stephen King adaptations being redone.
I mean, I think already this year we've had a lot, like, I mean, not like movie wise, but then it's been like a good number of like TV shows and stuff too. And
then again, actually, now I'm thinking about it, Castle Rock's coming. What if Silver Bullet ends up showing up in Castle Rock?
Oh, actually, that'd be really cool. I'd be definitely down for that.
If you're not familiar with Castle Rock, because you might not, because it's not really, unless you follow TV news, you might not have heard of this. Basically, Hulu are doing a TV show called Castle Rock, which is basically it's a town that's in a lot of his books. It's not a real place. It's a place that's made up in Maine, and basically it's going to be a kind of a TV show where you have characters from various books who are together, and it incorporates like multiple stories over the seasons. Is kind of the plan. At least that's the kind of understanding we're getting. I'm thinking it's kind of like how, like, you know how Fargo, not in the same time, I feel like that Castle Rock might have the same characters a bit more than Fargo does, but you know how Fargo, each season feels like it's like, okay, this season's very much these two Coen brothers movies kind of mashed together. I think that's what Castle Rock's going to be, where it's like, okay, season one's kind of a mix of these 2 or 3 stories.
Yeah.
And then if there's a season 2, there'll be, you know, so Castle Rock's coming, and there's a good cast there. Sissy Spacek's in it, Gene Levi's in it, Terry O'Quinn, to name someone who we've been talking about, was just cast in it.
Oh wow. Yeah, I'm really excited for that. I haven't really been looking at too many details about it, but I'm definitely sold. I think that would be a good fit for this.
I mean, to be fair, there's not a lot of details because J.J. Abrams is producing it, and as always, he is keeping the details very close to the chest.
Okay. Well, that's good. Yeah, I look forward to that. And then just real quick, something you brought up, a few minutes ago. I'm very excited for it, and I'm excited for, like you said, if it does well, I think we will see a lot more King adaptations. But I'm kind of excited / nervous about that. Like, it's like, oh, is this going to be really cool? Whether like, hey, this was really well done. Let's get like good, talented people to make more of this stuff. Or is it going to be one of those things like, oh, hey, this made a lot of money. Let's just churn out as much, like crap as we can.
Sadly, it'll maybe the latter, but
yeah.
Obviously we're looking forward to it. We will be covering that. That is out. Actually, this week. I think I said next week earlier on, but it's this coming week that it's out. So you can look out for that review. Either probably start next week. At the very earliest, maybe on Sunday, but probably early next week would be when the review goes up. But that has us. So obviously, I mentioned that this was the winning vote for the Patreon vote of the month. Obviously, they vote on. They vote through August for the movie for September, which what this was, and we did this earlier in the month than we usually do. Usually it's more in the middle. But the vote for next month is quite special because obviously next month is October, and because it's October, because it's the month of Halloween, we like to celebrate October, so there's a bunch of extra reviews coming anyway. We have about 3 or 4 planned per week for the entire month of October, at least, and we might do extras on top of that if we just take, if the spur of the moment takes us places. But because of that, we actually have 3 votes up for next month. 2 of them are Patreon votes, and then one of them is for everyone. One of them is for the public. Everyone who's watching this, there'll be a link in the description for that vote. And funnily enough, this was not intentional, but the public vote is actually werewolves. It just so happens that a werewolf movie won the previous vote, but so I've got the options. I'll tell you what they are. So the public vote that is open for everyone. You can find the link in the description below. The options are Cursed, which is the Wes Craven movie, Wolfen from the early 80s, The Howling, which is the big Joe Dante movie from the early 80s, and then the classic 1935 Werewolf of London. That's the 4 options, so you can vote in that. Everyone can vote in that in the link below. And then for patrons in the $5 tier and above, over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, those folk can vote in the other 2, one of which is Knee-High Mischief, and the options in that are Ghoulies, Critters, Gremlins, and Puppet Master. And clearly the theme there is that they're all small creatures or puppets. So fun. That was Tim's idea to have a Knee-High Mischief category, so you can blame him for that.
Yeah. And if you're not familiar with the phrase, it's you should check out the Knee-High Mischief trailer from Community Season 6. One of the funniest things I've seen in a long time.
I do love Community. Community's a good show. Season 4 aside, good show. And then the other vote, which we thought to be special again for October, it's Halloween month, we decided to have a vote that was nothing but classics that we've not done yet. So the other vote for Patreon is Phantasm, The Thing, The Shining, and The Omen. So big stuff there. So by all means, if you're on Patreon, vote in those 2 Patreon votes, and then everyone can vote in the Werewolf one. The link in that for that will be in the description below. So big stuff. So as we say, a lot of episodes coming in October. We have a whole thing planned. It's exciting. Please be excited. I just referenced a weird video game thing from like 3 years ago, but whatever. Those who get my Square Enix joke will laugh at it, and those who don't will just won't care.
I know I'm already stockpiling on movies. I think I have I've pre-ordered at least 2 movies. Actually, one box set, one movie coming out in October, and I think I ordered at least 3 movies that I should be receiving shortly and will not touch until October. So I'm very excited.
Yes. And yeah, we're going to have fun. October's good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So there we go. I will say this though. I did ponder this idea. I think what we're going to do actually, because we're going to be working so hard during October and all these extra movies, that we are actually going to take the first week in November off. After Halloween, there'll be a week without a Screams After Midnight. But don't worry, you're probably still going to be catching up on all the episodes we did throughout October. That is just to give us a rest, and obviously for everyone who doesn't care about streams on the channel, like they're sick of seeing these to go up. They get a week off before we go back to our usual 2 a week the following week. So that's the thing. I'm letting you know now. But that's all that stuff coming up. So thanks very much for watching. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Let us know what you think of Silver Bullet in the comments below. Get us on Twitter at mailed_fuzz for channel updates and all that kind of stuff. Get us on Twitter at Tim Vergulish for Tim, at Wibble89 for me. But otherwise, that is it. So thank you very much once again for watching. Keep watching scary movies. We'll see you next time.